According to Jose Luis Cordero, advisor at Singularity University, quote, in 2045, humans will be immortal, will be able to halt aging with a simple injection, unquote. Electronic devices are increasingly dominating our lives, but have we truly stopped to think how they will transform humanity? The application of new technologies to enhance the physical, intellectual, and mental capabilities of humans with the aim of eliminating illnesses, aging, or even death is what is now known as transhumanism. How will genetic engineering affect future generations? Do nanotechnological brain implants infringe on the freedoms of human beings? Will they widen the gap between rich and poor, with the rich improving their organisms in order to suffer fewer illnesses and live longer, while others will be unable to afford this luxury? This alteration of human nature and the concept of equality of all human beings poses the need for a profound analysis of human rights, systems, and ethics. Technology is not the be-all and end-all, and not every technological development necessarily represents human progress. It depends what it is being used for, and if it truly helps human beings in accordance with the principles of respect for life, freedom, and justice. Finding the right balance is a challenge we will have to face in order to build the future. In March 2021, the Magyar Nemzet, as republished by the Visigoth Post, issued a scathing critique of the Schwabian Great Reset into a quote-unquote new transhumanist world order under transnational governance. The Schwabians, quote, want to replace democracy with complex governance, prioritize technocracy over elections and MPs, and emphasize quote-unquote expertise that the general public doesn't understand instead of transparency. Schwab predicts that today's external devices like laptops and virtual reality headsets will eventually, most likely, be able to be implanted in our bodies and minds, unquote. The critique writer termed all of this Davos-era neo-communism. The government always claims incompetence when they make a mistake. You can keep your doctor and your insurance rates will go down. More incompetence. Dr. Fauci has been in charge of preventing a pandemic for decades, and he's the highest paid government employee in the USA. More incompetence. This almost sounds like the same propaganda pushed on the people when the Federal Reserve was created. What did they say at the beginning of the 20th century? The government is not capable of setting monetary policy. So let's give full power to this group of international bankers. What happened immediately after? World War I, the Spanish flu, the Great Depression, World War II, and we have never extricated ourselves from that yoke. It's modern-day slavery, debt slavery, and to that, there's a new dawn of carefully crafted terms coming our way. Inclusive capitalism, courtesy of the Vatican, UBI, or Universal Basic Income, ESG, or Environmental, Social, and Corporate Governments, P3, or Public-Private Programs. Will you stand up, or will you embrace the transhumanist agenda?
You are listening to VERITAS. If this is your first time, welcome home. To listen to tonight's full interview and all of our material, join the VERITAS family and click on the subscribe button at veritasradio.com. You can make your purchase with a credit card, PayPal, cash, check, money order, and even cryptocurrency. We are now accepting Bitcoin, Litecoin, and Ethereum. Don't forget to visit the VERITAS store for focused life force energy, MMS, CBD pure hemp oil, pure organic sulfur, flash drives with all our Sanitas and VERITAS seasons, and other great products. And if you want to get in touch with Mel, want to be a guest on this radio program, have a guest suggestion, or have feedback, just click on the contact button of our website at veritasradio.com. And if you're listening on YouTube, like, subscribe, and share it. And click the bell to be notified when new interviews are available. And now, here's your host, Mel Hostelrick.
Julianne Romanello earned her doctorate in political philosophy from Baylor University in Waco, Texas. In 2012, while at Baylor, Dr. Romanello earned the Richard D. Huff Distinguished Graduate Student in Political Science Award and passed Ph.D. comprehensive examinations with distinction. She is the author of many publications, and she's a wife a mother of 4 children. She now has a new website titled heartsoverhexagons.com. And directly from Tulsa, Oklahoma, I would like to welcome Dr. Julianne Romanello. Hello, Julianne, and welcome back to Veritas. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you so much for having me, Mel. It's a pleasure to be here.
The pleasure and the honor is all mine. And as I told you before we began, I follow your page on a daily basis because I don't know how someone like you, who, may I say this, and I say this with the utmost respect, but you were a university professor until not too long ago. So you worked, I don't want to say you work in the belly of the beast, but you are a trained educator, and you now are getting into deep rabbit holes, and you are providing this information to people in a manner where people look up to you. And I haven't seen somebody who could learn so much so quickly. How many years, again, if just to do a recap from our last discussion, how long have you been into this journey?
Oh, I am a newbie. I started digging into this stuff in April of 2019, and that's when my university was restructured in order to become a social impact institution. And, I just knew something was wrong. I knew that the language was sinister. I knew that the direction that the university was headed in had the feel of, I thought it was like Soviet style, ideology that was being promoted to us. So I just started to dig into that. And I spent a long time on education and, just Googling buzzwords like reimagining, reinventing. And, for a while, I couldn't put all of it together because I kept running into different symbols repeated over and over again, hexagons and the term impact. And I kept seeing about AI and blockchain technology. And those didn't seem immediately related to education, but I knew that the repetition was significant. So, it was about maybe 6 months after, April of 2019 that I started to put it all together. And from there, I just, I went straight to the UN and the trilateralists and, all of this terrible stuff that I never in my life would have ever imagined I would be digging into. But it's all right there. It's in white papers. It's on websites. I don't use the deep web. And the evidence is just astounding, but nobody really wants to talk about it. And a lot of people don't have the time to do the kind of digging that I did. So I do try to educate people, and that's always been a passion of mine. And gosh, right now it is just imperative that people understand what's happening.
Well, I say this again, you are a formally trained researcher. So when you see information, you tend to either put them on the side and say, this makes sense or this doesn't make sense. How have you been able to distill all this information that's out there? Because obviously there's misinformation, there's disinformation. How do you discern?
Well, I always try to go to the primary sources. I mean, that's something that I would do in a classroom, teaching political philosophy, teaching the great books. I would say don't use a textbook. We don't want to use someone else's gloss on, a person's thought, especially someone whose writings have been they've stood the test of time in order to make it into the canon of Western civilization. We don't want to take someone else's word for what they say. We want to look at the primary text and see what each of these thinkers say. So I've taken the same approach with digging into the Fourth Industrial Revolution and techno-fascism. And that is to say, I spend a lot of time just looking at corporate websites and the papers that different corporations publish or that our government publishes, because that's all you really need. I'll see sometimes on Facebook or other social media people who are skeptical of, what conspiracy theorists have to say. They'll often, say, well, you just watched that on some YouTube video. And I mean, there's a lot of great information out on YouTube, so I'm not disparaging that. But I have found it much more helpful and much more efficient just to follow the money, follow the lines of influence, and look at the corporations themselves that are doing this kind of thing. If anyone visits the World Economic Forum's website, you can read all of this for yourself. So that is a huge part of it. It's just making sure that your sources are good sources. Now, maybe the tricky part is to unpack what those sources are really telling us. And that's where I do think my academic training has proved very helpful, because I studied the philosophy, the life and writings of Eric Voegelin, who was a 20th century political philosopher, and he was interested really in everything. He had a lot of wonder, and he studied languages and consciousness and history and politics, and never got enough of any of them. So what his question was, that sort of motivated his intellectual endeavors, was a practical question. It was a political question. And later he would come to argue that it was a spiritual question. And that is, how do we explain the fact that in the 1930s and 40s in Germany, you had many educated people, many normal, mainstream, middle-class people who would watch the atrocities that were being prepared by the Nazi regime. They would watch it and not do anything, And in fact, many people, and especially in the academy and in politics, actually condoned those horrific actions. So Voegelin was, he lived in Germany and was watching these things develop, and he wanted to answer the question, how could it come to be that so many people who would seem to have a solid intellectual, ethical, spiritual foundation, how could they go so wrong on this very obvious question? And so he started to dig, how do we explain this? And he started looking at symbols of order and disorder in our political and historical and spiritual expressions. That is like the great art that was produced by people, or, canonical text in the different faith traditions. And he would say, what does this tell us about the health of the soul? So my academic training, it's very, in a way, my quest here has really mirrored Eric Voegelin's. But besides that, researching technofascism and spending a lot of time with Deloitte and McKinsey white papers, it seems so far from, writing about a political philosopher who looked to Plato as a guide. But what really helped me to do this latest endeavor that I'm, fully absorbed in, was the sensitivity to how symbols are repeated and they convey meaning and they shape our thoughts. And, if you look at at the corporate marketing, there are repetitions over and over again. And I knew those had to be meaningful. And so I drew on this academic training that I had in Vogelin's thought and unpacking symbols of order and disorder to help me understand how to interpret the statements that these large corporations and governments are providing us with. So that's been a major focus of my little social media campaign, as it were, is to try to help other people of all walks of life. I don't care who you are, if you're an academic, if you never went to school, left, right, it doesn't matter to me. Like every person needs to know what really is going on in our world. But I think that it's only going to be meaningful to each individual if they can really see it for themselves. And in order to see it for themselves, they're going to have to know how to cut through the lingo that has been developed over decades of of marketing research and funded with big bucks from the government and corporate coffers. So I do try to help people understand, what do these buzzwords mean? What is sustainable development? What is economic development? Those phrases sound very benign, especially if you're new to studying this stuff. I mean, I'm very, I think, sympathetic toward normies because I really was clueless for such a long time. So I try to remember that, I was naive and I was doing my own thing, and other people are in that situation and they have busy lives and lots of concerns, and that's by design too, how busy we are. So if I can help them get into that process of understanding what these words mean, if I can give them a little bit of an edge, then they can decide how to respond to this crisis that we're facing. And it is a crisis. It's every day I'm shocked at how far this has already progressed, and I'm shocked at where it's going. It's unbelievable. And, I have 4 children. We talked about that last time. And I don't want them to grow up in the kind of world that's being created. I don't want anyone's children to have to grow up in that. I don't want anyone's parents or elders or any other person to have to deal with the surveillance and the control that's being laid out as we speak every day.
I saw someone the other day with a big banner standing on the side. I should have taken a picture on the side of a road, and he looked like a clean-cut person. And it said, "I had to do something. I don't want my children in the future," or something along those lines. I don't remember exactly, but something along the lines of, "I tried to do something, and I would have want my children to know that I didn't do anything." It's almost as if people are saying things, as you said, they're progressing so rapidly that the normies, I'm glad you're using that name. I used to use, and I apologize because I used to use a more derogatory term. I used to call the zombified population. I like normies because, may I say that it's some people say knowledge is a what do you call it? Wisdom or knowledge is an option right now, and anybody who wants to continue turning on the mainstream media, that's their choice. But normies, if you are listening, and I know you are because you write to me almost on a daily basis, I have new people coming in because they feel that we're not judging them. We really are not. We want to present the information, and many of you, just like it happened to me many, many years ago, when somebody said to me, "Look at the Pentagon. Nothing crashed there." And I said, "Are you really insinuating that our well-intentioned government had something to do with this? Don't talk to me." That was one of my brothers. And I stopped talking to him for months thinking, how dare you? But then in silence, and this is what these normies who listen to us are doing. They're listening to you and to other guests. In silence, they start digging deep and deep and deep. And then they write back 2 or 3 months later and they say, my goodness, where was I? So do you think there's, and especially COVID, has a lot of people, working from home. They have probably had more time to research. Do you think this COVID-1984 situation has awakened a lot of people who were asleep less than a year ago?
My sense of it is that it has, and I've only been in this for 2 years. And so it's hard to sort of judge how receptive people are now in relation to, back in 2001 or something. And I was in the same position that you describe. I taught American government, and I love reading our founding texts. And so this was something that was a rude awakening for me, because for so long, I've taught these things. I've said, look at this. We have all of these checks and balances. We have this amazing political system that it does channel conflict in such a way that we can have political disagreements without erupting into a civil war. And I have to say, I still think that there are very good ideas at the heart of the American experiment in government, Not all. I've learned some things, in the past several months that just, I don't know, they make my heart heavy, really. but so I always had this sort of positive idea about the accomplishment of the American Constitution and the Bill of Rights and our form of government and our federal system. So it was extremely difficult for me to entertain the idea that 9/11 was an inside job, because it was difficult. So I totally empathize with those people who have not made it there yet, or who are just making it there, because it is difficult. And I think the American public, by and large, we're nice people. I'm just going to say it. I'm going to just say, most Americans that I know are good-hearted, and they're kind. They want to help others, but they're very naive. And I was the same way. And a lot of that has to do with the school system. A lot of that has to do with how total and complete the hold over our public media is. When you look at really who runs the media, it's a handful of very powerful corporations who work in concert with each other. And most people don't know that. And so they listen to these things and they think, oh yeah, journalists are interested in communicating truth, and they don't question it. But I think that the enormity of COVID-1984, or I like to call it the Coronapocalypse, I think the enormity of it and the mockery, and we can get into that in just a minute, that's gone on with it is so blatant. It's so in your face that many, many people who would not have questioned the government or, their city governments, state governments, or the corporations or the nonprofits, people are starting to question those groups now, because we're over a year into an entire inversion of life. The work from home is, I think it is oppressive. People need to get out. They need to be treated as professionals. And when you're at home, especially if you have children or somebody else working at home with you. It is not a professional environment. It's a sloppy environment, unless you're set up to do that, and you've been set up to do it for a long time. But people who went from an office to a makeshift room or corner in their house, I think this is a huge change. And the fact that people aren't back at the offices yet, that's nuts. I mean, people are not dropping dead in the streets from COVID. And, and then we're seeing these rollouts of the vaccine and the propaganda that's associated with it. You don't have that kind of propaganda with other vaccines. I mean, with, the tetanus shots, or what is it? I think that's like mixed into a DTaP shot. I mean, MMR, things like that. Never this kind of propaganda and concerts and, oh, look, you can, if you can prove that you've gotten the shot, you get to wear a special pin at work. That was going on at a university here in Tulsa. Not the one that I worked at, but a different one. I think people are starting to see that this is all nuts. And we had holidays canceled, graduations canceled. I think also I would like to say that those of us who are out there yelling constantly, wake up, wake up. I mean, I think that probably our persistence has helped. I mean, that I have found a few people who knew me before and who saw my transition into a researcher of conspiracies and an analyst of these things. They saw that transition. They thought, oh, Julianne's she's just upset that she lost her job and she's just venting. But I think that, after 2 years of me posting things constantly and I give talks locally and, try to, make time for interviews like this one, I think that after 2 years, when I haven't given up, then they've realized, oh yeah, it wasn't just, Julianne having a midlife crisis over losing her job. No, there's really something there. And these things that she keeps pointing out about, say, how nonprofits are moving into different sectors of the economy. Oh, it makes sense. It makes sense what she was saying about, social impact bonds and public-private partnerships. And, we're seeing all of that now. And, she said that they were going to track our health. And now we're seeing our employer issue this app, that you can log your daily steps and get an extra $25 a month, she said all that. So I think that the totality of this coronapocalypse and the persistence of truth tellers, truth activists, whatever, I still haven't found a good word for what we do, I think that it has made a shift. And I hear from people, by way of a message, on Facebook or LinkedIn or, just a plain email, and they'll say, I know something's up and I just want to do something. I just want to help. And, even just sometimes people will look at a specific area, like education. They'll say, I know that the kids need to be back in school, or I know that these computer generated programs are not healthy for my child. And they'll say, how can we fight this? So I don't know, Mel. I think that people are waking up, and I'm hoping that these social engineers have gone too far. I'm hoping that they have really gotten themselves into a mess. Now, every day though, I keep finding other things that seem like, oh well, they've revealed this or they've flubbed up in this area, but it just opened up the door for a new area that and I say, how did they do that so well? But, what can we do? You see it happen, you help people to understand it, and knowledge is power. And like you say, there is no reason why anyone has to be in the dark about what's going on. You look at the CDC's data and you're going to just be blown away by the discrepancy between their numbers and then the narrative that is presented on mainstream media. Unless you just don't want to see that discrepancy, unless you have some real mental block, then you're going to look at it and you're going to say, what on earth are we doing? So I hope that they've overplayed their hand, and that, more and more people are going to wake up. But I will say I am a little bit impatient at this point in this game.
Are we all? But not only are you so eloquent when you convey your message, but you have such a calm and collected demeanor that you bring people's guards down, I think. That's why a lot of them pay attention, because sometimes there's a lot of people out there yelling through out there, and people just get turned off by that sometimes. But if you do it in such a calm and collected way, and you say, look, you don't have to believe me. All this data is out there, as you mentioned before, the World Economic Forum. Find out who Klaus Schwab is. Find out who all these people are. And by the way, before I forget, I don't know if you know the name Rosa Koire, but she was the one who enlightened me about Agenda 21 many years ago. And I just heard from Christy, one of our listeners, that apparently, and I have not confirmed this, but I want to just put it out there just in case, that she apparently passed away yesterday. And on the 22nd of May, she tweeted out, and I'll read it here. She said, please pray for me, my friends, even through this hard fight we're in, this struggle to direct our lives in a natural, dignified, human way. We need to keep our love glowing. Thank you for caring. I'll feel your prayers. This is on the 22nd. I just sent her a message on Skype and on email. I have not heard back from her. But what I'm told is that Deborah Tavares, another of our guests here, who's a good friend of this show, she's the one who confirmed it. I still have to confirm through more people. But I just want to send that out there. Rosa was a great person. And as you know, she was a Democrat, but she was on our side. And this is why I want to tell people, listen, if you listen to this program, whether you're left or right, I don't care. You are my brother. You are my sister. And I want you to have peace and health in life. It doesn't matter where you are. This division is being caused by the controllers because they're laughing at us. This whole division and the virtual signaling. I live in southern Arizona. I was, more in tune with socialism. And sometimes I see people who are very withdrawn. Now they love this. They love to stay at home. They don't like to go out. They want to tell you to wear the mask. There are some people out there that truly believe that this should be the way of the future. And I remember years ago, I read a book by, the name of the author was Faith Popcorn, The Popcorn Report. And this is in the 90s. And she was talking about in the future, there might be something that causes the population to live in cocoons. At home. Wow. You don't go to work. You stay at home. You do your shopping from home. And when you think of the word apartment, this is what they want. They want the population completely segregated. And this has nothing to do with racism. They just want us to be separated because when we are united, we win.
Right. Yeah. Oh, that's terrible news about Rosa Koire. I watched one of her interviews. She had an interview with Chris Hedges, and I think the title, if I found it on YouTube, was One Bay Area. And that interview made so much sense to me because, as I told you, I had been looking at these symbols and patterns over and over again. And Rosa Koire discussed, she gave her interesting history and, of finding out about these Agenda 21 plans. And she really had such a a fascinating story. And I think it really was wonderful that she came from the left, that was a huge help to have her intelligent voice and her generous spirit, and also just her demographic that she was, she affiliated with the left.
Yeah.
It was a huge benefit to our cause, the cause of just helping people understand what these elites have been working on over the past century. And so she described this plan, One Bay Area, and she said, if you look, they have one or unified or unitary, in almost all of their plans. And I just was in awe, and I thought, that's exactly like what I have found in Oklahoma. We have an education plan called One Oklahoma, our high-speed internet, it's a research network. It's called One Net. All the chambers of commerce had these legislative programs. Ours was called One Voice. So over and over again, one, 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 one. And I thought, why on earth is this repeated over and over again? And, who's doing this? And she made sense of it. And for me, and she explained how the Agenda 21 lobby works, and it works outside of traditional political channels, and it has these plans that look so nice on their glossy white papers. And so that really is terrible news to hear that about her. So I'll wait to really get upset about it till it's confirmed. But
I hope it's not
that
true.
way, I know, but that really would be a loss.
Yeah.
But yeah, to your point about, and I just have to thank you for your kind words about how I present this stuff. Some of my friends say otherwise. They say, Julianne, you're so, well, I've heard, they've said some mean things to me, like in real life. They said, Julianne, you're so pointed in your comments. And really, I try not to be mean, because that's not going to win anyone over. And I genuinely like people.
Are they
so
offended?
I don't want to be mean to them anyway.
Are they offended by the truth? Is that what's going on?
Well, most people who are trying to fight this technocratic takeover of our life, they understand that you have to work locally. Like, the federal level it's totally corrupt, and this is a bottom-up strategy. And they use the globalists, they use that term, bottom-up policy making. So you start with the mayors, and Bloomberg finances a consortium of mayors. Actually, I think a couple of different consortia that have different names and do the same thing, so there's a local force that is imposing these Agenda 21, 4IR, Great Reset programs. And so if you really want to fight it, you're going to have to do it at the local level. And so part of my strategy in terms of trying to help people understand this is to point out the individuals who are doing this stuff. So, I write about our lousy mayor a lot, and I say, Mayor Bynum has said this is what it really means. And Mayor Bynum is not supporting education, and he is totally on the side of Bloomberg and Rockefeller, and I say things like that, and it's all true. It doesn't take a deep web search to find out the different connections that are there between our mayor and Michael Bloomberg, or our mayor and there's a leadership institute in the UK, and he was a keynote speaker. Like, how does a mayor from Tulsa, Oklahoma end up speaking at this very prestigious leadership council that with ties to, I think it's Prince Charles or Prince William, I'm not sure, either one. But, these connections are real and they're there. And I think it's really rotten that our mayor is going to sell out his neighbors, to bad guy impact investors. So I do say stuff like that. And they've said, well, that's really inappropriate, Julianne, or it's mean, or it's harsh. And my response is, well, it's true. It's absolutely true. And if you don't want this to happen to your children, and, I do tend to focus on education and human capital profiling and things like that. So I say, if you do not want your child to be pumped into the P20 pipeline to the workforce, you're going to have to go after our mayor. You're going to have to realize that he is actively promoting policies that turn your child into a data commodity. And so that has been, I've lost some friends over it, and I thought they were real friends for, years and years, but they did not appreciate that. And, the truth hurts, but also this guy he's a politician. So I'm not attacking. I don't even feel like it's attacking, but if you want to call it that, I'm not going after a private person who might just be ignorant of what he's doing. This is a political figure. He is elected, and in his capacity as mayor, he's doing these things. But that's what people, I've caught a lot of heat, from people that I know in real life over that. But on the flip side, I have heard such supportive and encouraging comments, from normal people all over the world who have said, Julianne, I really appreciate your posts. It makes sense of this, and I appreciate how you set it up. And I try just to be factual, and I try to think, well, 2 years ago, I didn't know any of this, so what would have convinced me, and what matters to me, and how would I have started to question this dominant narrative? So I try to write things like that. And also, I am a curious person. So it's fun too. I don't talk about that quite so often, but trying to figure out how can I present this stuff in a way that is going to be accurate and effective, in terms of giving people the information that is most helpful and useful to them. And how can I do that in such a way that it's more compelling than Deloitte and McKinsey?
Yeah.
So I don't know. And I have met a lot of wonderful people throughout this 2-year-long journey, people who have been doing this for much longer than I have. And, it's a burden, and it takes a toll. It takes a toll on the individual. It takes a toll on families and other relationships and things. And by and large, I have found that the people who are trying to do what you and I are doing, it's because you care about other people. And like you say, it doesn't matter if you're left, it doesn't matter if you're right. It goes really to our essential humanity. Do we want to dominate over other people, or do we really respect their freedom and their agency? And I think we talked last time, I am a Christian, and I do believe that we're all created in the image of God, and So I think that those of us who are trying to do this, like really, it's because we care about human beings as human beings. So I try to keep that as a focus when we talk about these things. But I mean, I'll use some tough language for the social engineers, like those guys at the top. I don't care about calling them evil. I think we should and we have to call them evil because they're so bad.
And this is the part that I don't understand from people. They see that the media is telling them how to live, what to think, what to say. It's no longer the Department of Education, it's the Department of Indoctrination. And this is the way it has been for a long time. And you probably know this more than I do. But it's not surprising when you think of the father of modern propaganda, Edward Bernays, and what he did all the way with cigarettes and all of it during World War II. He was probably the right hand of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, marketing the war efforts and so on. But then he had a grand nephew with the name of Mark Bernays Randolph, who founded none other than Netflix. So when you watch Netflix, you are essentially watching propaganda. Yeah, there might be a show here or there that people like, but if you look and you really dissect every scene of every show, you know it's part of the agenda. I tend to do that now when I have not canceled it, because to me it's part of my training. I want to watch what they're trying to do behind the scenes. All the people who say, I'm not going to be supporting this anymore, well, you're disconnecting yourself from the script. Do you want to know what's coming ahead? Well, maybe you need to discern a little bit of what they're telling you. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same way. I use Time magazine a lot, and I'll show screenshots of, different images that are presented in that New World Order rag. And, if you have, I think that some people need to be looking at these and decoding them for other people. So, you can read these, speaking of Time, they presented, there was a full issue dedicated to the Great Reset. And if you read this stuff, uncritically, then you're going to think it's a great program, and you're going to think that there is worldwide consensus, and you're going to think, why haven't we done this sooner? But there is a huge propaganda machine supporting that effort. And of course, Time magazine goes back to Rockefeller and the trilateralists, and it's always been propaganda. I think that the nuance of the propaganda has diminished, which is to say, I think that it's so in your face right now. But like you point out, our education systems they've been dumbing people down for a long time. And then, the effect that television has on the way that we process information. And when people are staring at a screen all the time and just passively receiving these images, I read someplace not too long ago that if you are watching a television show, the visual images actually produce alpha waves in your brain. And those are waves that you get just as you're ready to fall asleep.
Hypnotized.
Yes, exactly. And, and so if you are watching these images, I think, even if you are a critical viewer, you're still being sort of hypnotized. You're being lulled into this very suggestible state. And, and the same doesn't happen if you're listening to the television. So a lot of times, I'll listen to, some kind of video interview maybe, and I won't be able to watch it because I'm folding laundry or something, but I'll listen to it. And the same study found that if you are only if you're listening to the audio of that television program, then you do not have the same shift in your brain waves. So it really is the visual image. And so as we've had TVs in every private home, whatever messages these elites want to send to us, that we have welcomed them into our homes, and not even just in the living room, like the sleeping hypnosis room now, once you put a TV into it. But in every room, there's, American families have a TV. And it's making us intellectually like flabby, it's really dulling down our capacity for critical reflection, so that when we're confronted with propaganda, we simply cannot pierce through it. Now, so I think those of us who are aware of these things, we do need to be watching the propaganda so that we can help explain it to others, as much as we can. So I like to point out, oh, look, here's this picture from Time magazine, and see all of the purple in it. And that's a trope that I just happened to be following for a while, and this is what the purple means. And here's what this symbol right here means. And, when you see the language of impact and opportunity and, like economic development, this is what it means. So I think that you need folks like us to be watching it, and to, sometimes that means that you have to financially support it. But I think that there's a trade-off there, and we just have to make a well-reasoned decision about that. But yeah, Netflix, I watched the show. I used to like the show Orange is the New Black. It's about a women's prison.
No,
And
I watched
it had some scenes in there that were like gratuitous sexual scenes, and it could have been made without that. But, I sort of, as I was watching it, I'm thinking, well, I know that sex sells. So I just try to filter that out. But I liked that show because I thought, oh, look, it shows the humanity of these women inmates. And, I thought that the plot line and the character development was, it was impressive. And I really appreciated that series. Well, as I started to understand what social impact investing is, and how that is a financial system of basically profiting off of fixing people who you have broken, and that's sustainable economic development right there, I started to realize, oh my gosh, this show, Orange is the New Black, where you have all of these women in prison, and in one episode, they had the prison guards playing a game that they had made up called Fantasy Inmate. And they would rank all of the different women and say, oh, well, this one has a propensity to fighting, or this one has this handicap, or whatever, and they would rank all of them and play basically like fantasy football, but with these inmates. And as I got into understanding how these markets of trauma work for social impact investing, I realized, oh my gosh, this is a prediction about how we're going to live, So like we are being put into this prison, all of us, and just like you say, people are going to be kept in their own little cells, their apartments, their pods, separated from each other in a cubicle behind a screen. And you're going to be in prison like this physically and also digitally, as your behavior is tracked and traced, as your emotions, your thoughts, your interests, your web searches, whatever. It's all going to be tracked and traced. And the social score,
yeah.
Yes, it's setting up a social credit scoring. And if you think about like how fantasy football works, or fantasy inmate, it's all about a player's likelihood of being successful in some situation, or maybe it's a team. I don't play fantasy football, so I don't know the exact rules of it. But as I was watching this show on Netflix, I thought, or after the fact, I thought that is exactly what is being set up for us. And then at the end, toward the very end of the series, they had, and this was, I think I know I understood social impact finance by this point, because as Tony, my husband, and I were watching this show, and I think I just smacked him when they showed this image of one of the prisoners who had served her time. So she had re-entered society, and she'd met a friend who worked for a big foundation, and they go to, a fancy gala together, and you have all of these well-to-do people who think that they're helping. I can't remember what particular charity it was that they were working in. But they're hearing, this program's going to affect so many people's lives in a positive way. And then, and this is in the episode, on the big screen of this fundraising event, it flashes the word impact. And that's when I just turned to Tony and I smacked him. And I was like, what? Can you believe that? They just put it right there. It's so in your face. So I think you're absolutely right, Mel. I hope that wasn't too much of a digression, but
no,
it is absolutely amazing. And I think you are right. Like every single scene of the entertainment channels, of the news channels, of books. Gosh, I read some books, like usually I'm reading old books, but a couple of summers ago I was getting caught up on contemporary literature. And after I read those, looking back, say a year after I had read them, I thought, these were all priming. It's all priming people for what we're living today, It's really twisted. And it's hard. I think it is hard to, to accept that, because, like one of the books I read a book entitled Lilac Girls. And it wasn't, in my opinion, it wasn't great literature. It was sort of a page turner, because it was a World War II story, and it was about Polish. It was about Polish women who had been in a concentration camp. Which one was it? Ravensbrück, I believe. And it was talking about how they had been used as experimental subjects for these insane and cruel medical experiments. So it was a page turner, but it wasn't great literature. But looking back now, after COVID, looking back at that book, I think this, like the scenes, the plot, the different dynamics that are depicted in this novel. I mean, it's a novel, but it was based on historical fact. Those we're seeing the whole thing play out right now. So I think it's difficult to come to that realization, and it leaves you sort of lonely for for good entertainment, because you think, well, if something is a bestseller, if it's a popular book, if it's a TV show, if it's if it's on the big screen, it is all there for a reason and to prime us for something. And it really, it sort of ruins your chances for a Friday night date, I would think.
especially those of us who discern, maybe 10, 20 years ago when we were watching similar shows, we were just watching for the entertainment and we're not stepping out, and we let suspension of disbelief take over. But, I'm thinking 2008, Obama came along, took power in 2009, And I have here an article from June 13th, 2009, just a few months after the inauguration. Since June 13th, 2009, full-power television stations nationwide have been required to broadcast exclusively in a digital format. The switch from analog to digital broadcast television is known as the digital television transition. So it makes you wonder, why during the Obama administration they had such a concerted effort to push for digital TVs, and they were giving people free converters, free TVs, instead of questioning why our well-intentioned government is doing this. We should question why. Could it be that they want to hypnotize the population more efficiently? And I think the answer is yes. It's just like I saw Dr. Anthony Fauci in a video from some time ago where he had a slip of the tongue. He said, well, COVID-19, and then I realized, because we connect dots, this is what we do, right?
Yeah.
And he thought somebody else was supposed to win in 2016. So in reality, COVID-19 should have happened in 2017. And imagine, where will we be now after 4 years of the same story? I bet you that when Trump came along, and some people say, hey, Mel, come on now. He's just another puppet and this and that. But hey, at least we had better gas prices. I don't mean to get political here, but we had a better life for the last 4 years. I'll be the first one to tell you that. Had it been the other candidate, where would we be today? And are they just delaying it and they're starting in 2020? Is that what happened, you think?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure that, I mean, I would have to look at a lot of stuff to think about the ramifications of that happening in 2017, because 2020 seems like, to me, it seems like an important number for them. Like these elites and occultists, that's someplace I never thought I would get into in my studies, but you can't help bumping into it. They do like their numbers. And now come to think of it, in 2017, that would have been 100 years after the Spanish flu.
Exactly.
Wouldn't it? Yeah. And also the Reformation was on the 17th. The Protestant Reformation, wasn't it? It was 1517, I believe, wasn't it? So I think that, now that you mention it, that makes me wonder if that would have been a very significant number as well. But there was a kink in the plan. Yeah, I don't know what that would have looked like. But it's interesting that you mentioned the transition to digital TV under Obama, because, of course, Obama was the one who was giving away free smartphones to poor people, right? and it was like, I mean, I remember hearing people say, why is the government helping out these people with these phones? It cost me $400 to get a phone, but somebody can just get a free one from the government. And it's because if it's free, you're the product. And it was a pilot for the massive rollout of this track and trace technology. So that's really, now I had not thought about the slip of the tongue in the 2017. I'm going to have to really think hard about that one. But yeah, I mean, I think that, both sides are, the political spectrum, they're both involved in this. And like you say, these elites like to pit us against each other and watch the show. And I said earlier something about, you asked about whether or not more people are waking up now. And I mentioned that, just that they have gone so far with this plan. It's not subtle. It can't be ignored. So I think that is a catalyst for people waking up, but also the mockery. And these, I just really 2 years ago, I never would have expected to hear these words come out of my mouth. But these elites love to mock people. And so they like to pit left and right against each other. They like to make, politicians flip-flop and then watch the show and see what we'll do. And, I think they do that with the media, with like the pictures that are presented in Time magazine. They're making fun of us with the books that they publish. They're making fun of us, and I really think that's rotten. but it is there, and so if we can figure out like what are they making fun of us about, and how do we provide an entertainment for them, and if we can stop that, then by say not stoking the left-right divide, then I think that would, put us ahead a little bit. But also at the same time, I have found, just speaking very candidly, generally, most people whom I've encountered who really understand this stuff, they do tend to be more conservative leaning here in the States, at least, or they're on the far left, sort of to where they're like anarchists, and sort of where the left meets the libertarians.
Right.
And I think the common denominator that I've found just in my personal experience is that by and large, like, conservatives in this country tend to be open to the existence of God, and I think that you do have to have some sort of a spiritual perception, orientation, to be able to see this stuff. And that does not mean that you have to be a Christian to see it. It doesn't mean that you have to be, a member of or identify with one of the three monotheistic faiths. But because I've met people of all sorts of religious persuasions, but I think that we do see more conservatives here who get it and who understand that there's something going wrong. And I think that that's because the conservatives are more open to spiritual reality versus, kind of mainline, progressive thinking liberals, who have adopted this paradigm of science and of historical progress. And most of the major religious traditions view history as well. I mean, we have cycles in history, so that's like anti-progressive, but also, in the Christian tradition anyway, you have the sacred history and secular history, and you're not going to make moral progress in secular history. So, that's what the kind of middle of the road Democrats, liberals, progressives, whatever you want to call them, like, I see them wanting to, I see them like promoting a philosophy of history that is progressive. It thinks that we do make this moral progress and that our nature is not fixed, that they believe human nature actually is malleable. And so I think conservatives, people of faith generally, even like the anarchists, they have an idea of a fixed human nature, and they don't believe that in general we are capable of major historical progress in the moral realm. So those are very broad generalities, and they, of course, break down in individual circumstances, and everyone has their own unique story. But if I'm just trying to start with common opinion and common sense to try to understand things, and that's a very Aristotelian method there, I would add, then that's sort of where I would begin to understand that left-right divide that we're seeing. And yeah, but we're going to have to pull in people who disagree with us on those things, because I think we really are going to have a sort of mass people's movement to fend off some of this very bad stuff.
And we are in the last chapter. We have to act now, because if not, the doors are closing. We have to take a one and only break. But before we go, and that's the problem. You mentioning religion and science. Science has become dogmatic, in my opinion. I used to think that science was all about observation, and more observation, and questioning the scientific consensus. But now they tell you the science is settled. Just like science was settled with cigarettes and DDT and even vegetable oil. Oh, I'm sorry. We are the ones talking about that, and how eating fat, actually real fat, is good for you, but they tell us no.
It's good for you.
Exactly. So I want to discuss, when we come back, inclusive capitalism. And I don't mean to be dropping names, but I interviewed Charlotte Iserby years ago, the deliberate dumbing down of America. And her name keeps coming back to my mind when I speak with you, because it is part of the problem. It is part of the script. They want to dumb down the population so you don't question anyone. Even COVID-19, nope, the science is settled. Those masks, even though they're the equivalent of a mosquito going through a fence, but you still need to wear it a year after. It doesn't matter if you are vaccinated or not. But when we come back, I want to discuss this also, conscious capitalism. I discussed this, and I mentioned this, folks, Charlotte Iserby or Conscious Capitalism. I did these shows in the past. If you want to go back for more information, you are always welcome to go to the archive. But I discussed conscious capitalism, which I agree with if it's, for example, a publicly traded company that say they deal with food and they promise the shareholders, look, we don't want to put any glyphosate in our food because that's good for people. I believe in that kind of conscious capitalism. The one I don't believe in is the inclusive capitalism originating from the Vatican. And when we come back, we're going to dive deep into this portion. How can people learn more about your work, Julianne?
Well, I have a public profile on Facebook. It's not a page, it's a profile, and you don't have to be a Facebook user to access my posts. It's Julianne Romanello, and you'll know it's me because I have a black shirt that says "Resist the New World Order" on it. So you can, I think, I can't really friend anyone anymore, but you can follow. And then I've started a website. It's still in the beginning phases, but I've posted a lot of my interviews and things like that there, and it is www.heartsoverhexagons.com. So the shape heartsoverhexagons.com. And I'm trying to get that beefed up with actually writing some things on there, but the social media has been so effective that it's been hard for me to transition on, but I do hope to do that soon. So you can find me there, and send me an email at julianne.romanello@gmail.com.
So much more to discuss with Julianne Romanello when we come back. I want to also discuss the high cost of low price. Makes you wonder what that is, but I'll tell you when we return. This is Mel Hostelrick, and you are listening to VERITAS. Don't go anywhere.
Thank you for listening to the first part of this important VERITAS interview. To listen to the rest, and all of our material, proceed to the member section, or join the VERITAS family by subscribing. Click on the subscribe button at veritasradio.com. You can make your purchase with a credit card, PayPal, cash, check, money order, and even cryptocurrency. We are now accepting Bitcoin, Litecoin, and Ethereum. Don't forget to visit the VERITAS store for Focus Life Force Energy, MMS, CBD Pure Hemp Oil, Pure Organic Sulfur, flash drives with all our Sanitas and Veritas seasons, and other great products. And if you're listening on YouTube, like, subscribe, and share it. And click the bell to be notified when new interviews are available. Now, proceed to the members section or subscribe to listen to the rest of the interview. You don't want to miss it. Thank you.